The rain came down so hard that night, we could barely breathe through it. And still, our campfire burned brighter than any fire has a right to burn in a downpour, like it didn't need wood at all, like it was feeding on something else. By the time I understood what that something else was, one of the people I went into those woods with was already gone. Not lost, not hurt, gone the way a name goes when you reach for it and find nothing there. Here's what happened. 4 of us did this every autumn. Pick a stretch of nowhere, hike in, disconnect for a weekend, come back with something to laugh about for the rest of the year. That year it was Cale's turn to choose, and he picked a valley 2 hours past the last marked trailhead, a place his uncle used to fish before the access road washed out. No permits, no rangers, no other groups. Cale said, grinning like that was the whole selling point. Just trees and us. Maylise wasn't sold. She was the one who checked weather radars before trips instead of vibes. The one who read trail reports nobody else bothered with. There's a storm system moving in Saturday night, she said. We should be down and out before it hits. We will be, Cale said. He wasn't. Bram rounded us out third, quiet, steady, the kind of person who checked everyone's water levels without being asked and always seemed to know exactly how far we'd walked without looking at a map. And then there was Naries, sharp-tongued and quick to laugh, always the first to say out loud whatever the rest of us were quietly thinking. 4 of us. That was the whole group. I've gone over it 100 times since, wondering if it would have gone differently with more people to notice what was happening sooner or fewer people for it to take before we understood. We parked where the access road gave out and walked the last 4 miles in, Cale leading with a confidence none of the rest of us fully shared. The valley opened up just before dusk, pines thinning into a wide clearing with a creek cutting along one side. And the first thing any of us said out loud was about the fire. It was already burning, right in the center of the clearing, in a fire pit ringed with blackened stones, flames going strong, as if someone had lit it 20 minutes before we arrived, and then simply vanished. Nobody was in sight. No gear, no tents, no sound of another group anywhere in the valley. Maybe they left in a hurry, Bram offered, though none of us could think of a reason anyone would abandon a burning fire this far from anything. Naries crouched near it, holding her palm out at a careful distance, testing the heat. It's not even smoking right. Look, no ash pile building up. No logs burning down to coal. Just fire. Steady, like it's not using anything up at all. Cale wanted to sit right down next to it. Maylise stopped him with a look. Something built that on purpose, she said. I'd rather understand why before any of us gets comfortable next to it. We pitched our tents in a loose arc around the clearing, close enough to use the firelight, far enough that nobody had to sit directly beside it. Cale, predictably, ended up beside it anyway within the hour, warming his hands, completely at ease. Free heat, he said. I'm not going to interrogate good luck. None of us laughed with him. The rain started around 9, and it started hard, the kind of storm that turns a valley floor into a shallow moving river inside 20 minutes. We scrambled to stake down the tents, soaked through before we'd finished, and by the time I looked back toward the clearing, expecting to see the fire drowned and smoking out, it was taller, brighter, standing perfectly upright against wind strong enough to flatten the treeline around it. That's not possible. Maylise stood frozen, water streaming down her face, staring at flames that didn't so much as bend in wind hard enough to snap the guy lines on her tents. Bram waited closer to it than any of us wanted to, close enough that the heat should have driven him back a step, and instead he just stood there, oddly still, staring into the flames like he'd forgotten the rain around him entirely. Bram. Naries grabbed his sleeve and pulled. Bram, come back. He blinked, surfacing slowly, like he'd been somewhere underwater. Sorry, I was thinking about my sister's wedding. Haven't thought about that in years. Don't know why it came up just now. We chalked it up to exhaustion and cold. None of us thought much of it. Not yet. By the time the storm broke past midnight, we were soaked despite the tents, wrung out, desperate for sleep. The fire had settled into a steady, patient burn that threw warm light across all 4 tents. Tents that, without any of us discussing it, had ended up facing inward toward the fire instead of outward toward the dark trees. I woke twice that night. The first time was to the low sound of someone talking near the fire, a murmur too quiet to make out words. When I unzipped my tent flap, there was no one there. Just the flames, steady and patient, and a smell in the air like wood smoke mixed with something sweeter underneath it. Not quite a real smell, more like the memory of one, the way a childhood kitchen smells in a dream you can't place when you wake up. The second time, I woke because someone was standing just outside my tent. Kyle, silhouetted against the firelight, not moving, not speaking. Kyle, I keep thinking about the treehouse my dad built, he said, voice strange and slow, like each word had to travel further than it should to reach his mouth. I haven't thought about that treehouse in 15 years. Why can't I stop thinking about it now? I told him to go back to sleep. He did eventually, but the way he'd said it stuck with me. Not like a memory surfacing naturally, but like something had reached in and set it there on purpose, right at the front of his mind, and then stepped back to watch what he'd do with it. I didn't sleep again until the sky started to lighten. Morning came in gray and cold. The storm passed, but the ground still soaked through everything we owned. The fire hadn't dimmed at all overnight. If anything, it looked more solid in daylight than it had by dark. Less like flame and more like something with edges, something with weight, something holding its shape rather than dancing the way fire should. Nares found the first hard evidence, at the edge of the clearing where the trees thickened. A second fire ring, older, overgrown with moss, cold and dead, but built in the exact same pattern as ours. Same stone count, same spacing, same rough circle. There's a third one further in, she called back, already walking. A long pause, longer than the first. And okay, a fourth. We gathered around the fourth ring together. Nobody wanted to be the one standing there alone. It was the oldest looking of the 3 dead ones, stones half swallowed by moss. A young pine growing up through what would have been the center of the fire itself. Its roots split around the blackened stones like they'd grown there out of necessity rather than accident. That tree's got to be, 30 years old. Bram crouched beside it, running a hand along the bark. Maybe more. Nares walked the rough spiral connecting all 4 rings, pacing it out loud without seeming to realize she was doing it. This one's oldest. Then this one. Then this one. She stopped at ours, the only one still burning, flames throwing long shadows across her face even in daylight. Then ours. So what, it just moves? Cale's voice had lost some of its earlier confidence, though he was still trying to hold on to it. Burns out in one spot, starts up in another, or it doesn't move, Maylee said quietly. Maybe it just finishes with one place and waits for the next people to wander in and start up again somewhere close by. That tree didn't grow through that ring by accident, Cale. Something stopped feeding that fire 30 years ago, and it's been sitting cold ever since, waiting its turn to matter again. Cale tried to laugh it off from where he stood at the edge of the group. Old campsite. People reuse rings. That's just what people do. 4 rings, Cale. Identical pattern, perfectly spaced like something's been doing this the same exact way for a very long time. And ours is just the current one in the sequence. The one still burning. The one that hasn't finished yet. Nobody answered that for a long moment. The only sound was the fire behind us, steady, patient, entirely too quiet for something that size. Maylis walked slowly around our own fire next, studying the base of it with the same care she gave to trail maps. And when she finally spoke, Her voice had gone flat in a way that scared me more than if she'd sounded afraid. "There's no wood under this," she said. "There never has been. Look at the stones. Nothing's charring beneath the flame. It's not burning fuel. It's burning something that isn't there. We should have left right then, packed soak gear and all, and walked the 4 miles out on no sleep rather than stay another night in that clearing." Some of us wanted to, but Cale pushed hard to stay, insisting this was nothing but an unusual rock formation venting gas, some natural explanation none of us had heard of yet, and exhaustion did the rest of the convincing for him. Nobody relished a storm-soaked trail on zero sleep. That decision cost us more than any of us understood in the moment. Through the second day, the fire kept its slow, patient burn, and small things kept slipping away from us, one at a time, each in a different way, so that none of us connected them until it was already too late to matter. Nary's was the first. She was digging through her pack for her dog's leash. She always brought it, a habit, a comfort thing, some ritual about home. And she stopped halfway through the motion, staring at the leash in her hand like she didn't recognize what it was for. "What's his name?" she said, quiet, almost to herself. "I know I have a dog. I can see the leash. I can't." She looked up at us, something close to panic breaking through. "I can't remember his name. Bram lost his next, differently. He was writing in the small notebook he always carried, the one where he tracked mileage and elevation out of habit, and Maylis glanced over his shoulder and saw he'd written his sister's name, and then crossed it out 3 times, each attempt slightly different, none of them apparently right. "I know I have a sister," he said when she asked. "I can picture a kitchen. I can picture a laugh. I can't put a face to it anymore. I keep trying, and there's just warmth where a person should be." Cale's went the quietest of all. Maylis asked him, almost as an afterthought, what he did for work back in the city, something we all knew, something he'd complained about 100 times on past trips. He looked at his own hands like they belonged to someone he'd just met. A long pause. "I don't remember." By the second evening, 3 of the 4 of us had lost something we couldn't get back, each loss surfacing in its own way, at its own pace, like the fire was learning what worked on each of us individually and refining its approach. Only Maylis hadn't lost anything yet, and she was the one furthest from the fire, the one who never once sat close to it, who kept her distance even when the cold made that difficult. It was Maylis who finally understood what we were looking at, though not by explaining it to us the way I might have once assumed. She showed us. She'd been quietly testing something for hours, and that night she brought us to the edge of the clearing, just far enough from the flames to feel steady, and she held up a photograph from her wallet, a photo of her mother, worn soft at the corners from years of handling. "Watch," she said, and stepped closer to the fire. Not too close, just close enough. Within a minute, her breathing changed, slowed, her eyes going distant in the exact way Bram's had that first stormy night. She stepped back before any of us had to pull her, shaking her head hard like clearing water from her ears. "For a second," she said, voice unsteady, "I couldn't remember why I was holding this photo. I knew it mattered. I couldn't remember who she was to me. She hadn't lost anything before because she'd simply never let herself get close enough, not once, not even for warmth. The rest of us had been drawn in a little further every night without noticing, the way you don't notice a tide until you look up and the shore is far away. It takes something every time we get near it," she said. "Small things first, the ones we think we can afford to lose, then bigger ones. And I think if someone stays close enough for long enough." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. All 3 of us were already looking at Cale. Cale had been closest to that fire every single night, longest of any of us, without complaint, without ever once stepping back the way the rest of us eventually had. He'd lost his job, a fact he no longer even seemed troubled by. And now, in the low light of the second evening, He sat closer than ever, and when Nares called his name, it took him a long moment to turn his head, as if the sound had to travel some distance to reach him. "Kale, we're leaving. Now. Tonight. I want to stay a little longer," he said, in a voice that had started to lose the particular shape of his own. "It's warm." Bram tried to physically pull him back from the flames, and Kale turned to look at him with an expression none of us recognized on his face. Calm, hollowed out, already halfway, gone somewhere the rest of us couldn't follow. "Kale, please." My own voice cracked on it. "Tell me my name. Just tell me my name, and we'll go." He looked at me for a long moment, and something almost like recognition passed behind his eyes, fragile and brief. "I know I'm supposed to know that," he said. "I can feel the shape of it. I can't reach it anymore." Nares tried next, kneeling in front of him, gripping both his hands like she could pull him back by force of contact alone. "The treehouse. Your dad built it, remember? You told us about it the first night. You said you hadn't thought about it in 15 years, and then you couldn't stop." Something flickered across his face at that. The faintest pull of a frown, like a word sitting right at the edge of his tongue. He stopped. Started again. It was a ladder. I remember a ladder. I don't remember climbing it. "That's something," Bram said, too quickly, too hopeful. "That's a real memory, Kale. Hold on to that one." But even as he said it, Kale's eyes drifted back toward the fire, drawn the way a compass needle settles no matter how many times you turn away. Melis tried a different angle, crouching low, so she was level with him instead of standing over him. "What's the last trip we took before this one?" "Spring, 3 months ago. You picked the site that time, too. You made us watch the sunrise, even though everyone wanted to sleep in." He gave her nothing. Not even a flicker he'd given Nares. I tried once more, closer this time, close enough that the heat of the fire pressed uncomfortably against the side of my face. "Kale, it's me. You've known me since we were 19. Say my name." For a moment I thought it had worked. His lips moved, shaping something, and then the shape dissolved before any sound came out of it, like trying to hold water in a closed fist. "I'm sorry," he said, and it was the most like himself he'd sounded all night, which somehow made it worse. "I don't think it's going to give that one back." We kept trying past that point anyway, past the point where any of us believed it was working, because stopping felt like agreeing to something none of us could say out loud. Every memory we handed him slid off like water off stone, already worn smooth by years of the same current. In the end, it was Melis who made the call none of us wanted to make. "If we drag him, and it doesn't let go," she said, "it might take from all of us trying. We have to go. Now." I've spent years telling myself we had no other choice. Some nights, I believe it completely. Other nights, I'm not sure it's anything more than the story I need in order to sleep. The 4 miles back to the car took most of the night in the dark, soaked and freezing, none of us speaking, none of us looking back toward the orange glow behind us for as long as it stayed visible through the trees. When it finally disappeared behind the ridge, something in my chest loosened just slightly, and immediately felt worse for loosening it all. We didn't talk about the fire, or Kale, or the second and third and fourth rings we'd left behind in those trees, cold and waiting for whatever comes after theirs eventually goes dark too. The tree line broke just before dawn, and the car was there exactly where we'd left it, looking impossibly, almost insultingly ordinary in the gray morning light. There were 3 of us standing beside it. We reported everything. Rangers went in 2 days later and found the clearing precisely as we described. The fire pit, the blackened stones, the 3 older rings scattered through the surrounding trees. No fire burning at all by the time they arrived. No smoke, no scorch marks fresh enough to explain what we'd seen, no sign that anything had burned there in weeks. And no sign of Kale. What they did find, placed with unsettling care in the center of the cold stone ring, was a small pile of fine gray ash shaped unmistakably like a person curled on their side, facing the way we'd walked out. Bram never got his sister's face back. He has photographs of her now, and he says looking at them feels like studying a kind stranger he's somehow obligated to love. Neri still can't remember her dog's name, and some nights that loss bothers her more than anything else about that trip, more than Kale, more than the ash, because it's small and stupid and hers, and it's simply not there anymore. As for me, most days I'm fine. But every so often, usually when it's cold and I'm sitting near any open flame, I find myself reaching for something, a birthday, a face, a name I should know without thinking. And for just a second, I can't be entirely sure it's still where I left it. I wonder sometimes what that fire looks like now, burning quietly in a valley 2 hours past the last marked trailhead, waiting for the next 4 people who think free warmth in a storm is nothing but a stroke of luck. I wonder if it's still waiting at all, or if, by now, it's finally learned how to walk. If this is the kind of story that finds its way back into your head at 3 in the morning, subscribe to the Forgotten Campsite. There's another fire waiting next week.